welcome everybody to Nightingale, and we're a nice turnout tonight. Thank you all for coming. So we have a good program with the Cardinal Land Conservancy and what they're trying to do in Cincinnati about creating urban green spaces. That's really exciting what's going on. So we have a panel of three people. Andy Dickerson is the Executive Director of Cardinal Land Conservancy, and he has a long history of conservation work. And he has been Director of Science for the Ohio chapter of the Nature Conservancy, and he's a founding member of Valley View Foundation. And he's worked with farmers to capitalize on the conservation benefits of the Farm Bill. So we're really lucky to have Andy here to tell us about what's going to happen here in Cincinnati. And now we have two other panelists who join Andy. Sam Settlemeyer, he's the Conservation Program Manager for the Civic Garden Center, and they're going to be part of this project. Sam is responsible for overseeing training and education and ongoing conservation projects aligned with the Civic Garden Center's focus on providing knowledge, resources to the neighborhood, moving invasive species, and establishing healthy ecosystems. And Peter, I'm sure everybody knows Peter. He's been here before speaking about his community gardens. He's the director of the Turner Farms Community Garden Programs, and you may have heard him on the radio quite often. He talks about seasonal garden problems, and I got to know him from Price Hill Community Garden Center, amazing place, really a great center for people to come together and connect. So he's been long interested in organic farming and the evolving practices of permaculture, regenerative farming. So we're lucky to have him. So Peter, thank you for coming, and Sam. So we'll start with Andy.
All right, thank you. I think the way tonight's going to go is I'm going to show you a few slides and talk about Urban Conservation Project. And then we'll have a little panel discussion with a couple of our partners at Turner Farm and Civic Garden Center, talking about urban conservation work and protecting green space and growing food and gardens. Before I start, please say hello to Susan Sprigg. She's our Director of Operations. But if there's questions after this, she can help answer them. Managing our operations, she's also going to help us by managing our urban project. All right, let's get it for sharing. All right, here we go. Up and running. Hopefully, you'll let us know if you people in the digital world can't see this. But I just wanted to share with you, the evolution of Cardinal Land Conservancy. We started in 7 counties in Ohio, and about 2 years in, I'm the first employee, and I've been there 10 years. We added urban open space to our mission. So for a long time, we didn't know what that looked like. And then a couple of years later, we kind of knew what it looked like, but we couldn't act on it yet. But recently we've gone from 1 employee to 2 to 3 to 5 to 10. Now we're up to 15. Oh. So we're better able to act on tackling the urban conservation problem. And we're serious about it. So what we want to do, and what I'll talk to you about tonight, is working with other like-minded groups in the city, engaging local communities. I'll make this something we do with them and not to them, and trying to own land for the public benefit, what that means. The big thing for me, and I can't help, my background is science. As Director of Science, or the Ohio chapter of TNC, I always want to be sure that wherever I am, we lead with science. And sometimes it needs to be created. You don't have it. And one of the things that we've worked closely with the green space team from Green Umbrella and OKI and Great Parks in Hamilton County in creating these priorities of what areas should be preserved and protected. And we've created this map, and I'll share it with you and show you how to get to it, but it's incredible. We're also looking at the climate equity indicators, and we kept the environmental justice data before it was deleted off of all the servers. So we know where those areas are, and we're allowed to say them. We also have our own land saving criteria that we developed for work in the city. We don't just take every green space that's available. That's not how we work. We have a prioritization system. And we also are partnering with the Hamilton County Land Bank. And that's an interesting partnership because it's rusty going forward or starting out, but we hope to get a lot better. But they've got thousands of vacant parcels around the city. And I understand their job is to turn those into tax paying parcels again. But some of them that will never happen to. And I think where there's some canopy and environmental quality, we can work with them to get them gifted to us so we can take care of them. So this is that map. I mean, you can see, hopefully, with your third eye that Cincinnati's kind of in the middle. And what we did was create a prioritization that included multiple layers. So for the green layers, so the conservation layers, the 8 layers are streams with habitat quality, canopy cover, climate connected, climate resilient, endangered species, and something else. But the darker the green, the more layers overlap in the same area. And the other thing, I did was they lifted out all the rooftops in concrete. So we're not identifying areas that need protected, that there's nothing to protect. So the dark green areas on this map warrant conservation because they've got the most conservation values. And the red is kind of the opposite. So the red represents streams with no habitat quality, no canopy cover, high cancer clusters, high breathing disorders, high minority and low income. So we know when we're going to restore where we should start restore. And the
food desert neighborhoods?
we didn't identify food deserts. That's something we can add, but for this one, well, that's our partner thing too. But look at that Ohio River, Bruce. That's kind of a no-brainer for both. So it needs to be restored and it's got high conservation value. So when we created this map for Cardinal, it was like, well, what do we do with that? Where do you start? And the approach that we've taken was to start in a few communities that don't have a lot going on right now. There are some little darlings, I call them, in the city that get a lot of attention from big corporations. And we've got an opportunity to work with a developer to get some pieces of land. I put some of the drawings in the window, but I'll share them with you as well. In the Cuff neighborhood. And, I grew up when I was little in the East End and then moved to the East Side, but I didn't know what Cuff stood for. Does everyone know that? Mm-hmm. Clifton University, Fair. What? But it's in the Cuff neighborhood. So by us partnering with this developer and having a warehouse space there, a new office space, we're able to use that as a base of operation and work in North Fairmont, South Fairmont, Cumminsville, Cuff, and Sedamsville. Oh, I mean, we were lucky enough to be a recipient of the leverage support grant from the city of Cincinnati. So our plan of operation resonated with them so much that they funded us this year. So we are working very closely with the city to try to work on these green spaces, and especially Mika Owens, as one of the sponsors of the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. We know that the outdoors are good for everybody. But specifically, we know that every 3% increase in canopy cover a child's exposed to on the way to school adds an IQ point. We know that canopy cover in green space decreases gun violence. So what we're trying to do with that map is overlay 1,500 meters around schools in those 5 communities and start to focus on our partnership with the land bank, with our partners, and try to preserve green space and restore it. So I'll talk about, the flagship. It's funny because this guy's developer's dad did a lot of work on Union Terminal, and Union Terminal was the starting point for the Justice League and Super Friends, right? So it's just fitting that we call this Environmental Justice League. So it's down on Marshall and McMicken. What we're doing is we're starting out leasing the property for $1, but we are paying for the upkeep of the property and any repairs and taxes. So it's a special kind of lease. We are getting a deal, but it does cost a significant amount of money that we are raising. The idea is to have this piece I'm not sure how many parcels it is, but it's more than 40 that they put together over 30 years. But the idea is for us to kind of breathe life into these spaces. So here on this map, you can see this is Marshall, or no, this is McMicken. I've got it sideways. Marshall comes down, Central comes up, and these are the spaces that the developer had that we are getting for $1. Now, the idea is that they're willing to donate these parcels to us at the end of the 5 years. So we are acting like these are ours. And by ours, I mean ours, right? So starting out, this is right on the hillside corner, Marshall and McMicken. This is one of the green spaces. It's about 4 acres. And working out and talking to Civic Garden Center and other partners, what we should do here. The idea is to have it green space, have a microforest, and have the Civic Garden Center run their Market Gardener program off of a piece of it. So it'll be open, but utilized by the public. There are 2 buildings there that just got demolished Friday and Saturday. So they're gone. We're hoping to just have impervious parking there, and the old buildings are now not there, not a problem anymore. We also want to have a trail there. So in terms of restoration, we're just going to work closely with Civic Garden Center, and we're talking with other partners as well, like UC's C4H, Center for Collaboration, Climate, Community, and Health. Truly multidisciplinary researchers and professors that want to focus all of their individual efforts on helping us measure results at the scale we're working at in the urban environment. So we hopefully will be the gel and inspiration for all those folks. Anything from biology to how many times kids hit their asthma inhaler. Things we can know or at least correlate. So that's one of the pieces. So that piece I just showed you is up and to the left of the map. This is on the other side, a little bit farther south on McMicken. There were 2 warehouses here, and they actually tore down one warehouse because it was in bad shape, and they left another warehouse. So we are treating that warehouse as a place where we can have a base of operations. And we partnered with Adventure Crew, and Adventure Crew is keeping all of their equipment and all the wonderful recreation equipment that they have, bikes, canoes, all their outdoor stuff in there as well. So they're gonna run that as their base of operations as well, and we're grateful to have them. The idea is to use this as a place of teaching, a place of gathering, place where we can organize our stuff. Our crew, we've got 7 conservation team, we're gonna work out of there, and they'll be able to mix up store tools and head out and get conservation work done at scale throughout the region. There's the so the piece I didn't blow up is this piece here, and this is where the office building is located. It also has an apartment next to it, and the apartment needs a little work, so we're not sure we're gonna fix that up yet, because that's a big price tag. But this is where we're gonna have our urban office. This is where Adventure Crew is gonna be. We've got Queen City Pollinator that wants to come in. Camp Joy wants to have some folks there. But the idea is to have folks who are working together on the Green Cincinnati plan and kids and getting people engaged outside to be working out of here. Our idea is that if we're able to work there together, we can do our own thing, but there are some things that we will do together and we will do it better because we're together. The interesting part is, while Tony and the San Celoni team has put together all these parcels over the years, there's a 2-acre space in the middle that the city owns. What's funny is the city doesn't know they own. So we have an initial conversation that they're willing to gift that to us if we're able to secure the lands around it. So, I think what we're here to talk about is, what we can do, and I'll let these guys talk a little bit as well, but how can we work together and what's next for this program and us outside of the restoration, and then hopefully have a conversation with what would you guys like to see, and how can we fill that picture, and what partners are here that should. So with that, I'll pass it on to Sam.
I just asked a question, Aaron.
Microphone.
I need a.
How many people know who Phil Donahue was?
I'm gonna ask a quick question.
Hit the button, make sure it came on.
There, quick question. If you want me? No.
Push it and hold it.
Good question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The city, as you know, is densifying and they're going to be building and there's going to be a lot of development going on. And I was pretty concerned about trying to maybe establish some green areas, and I didn't know if they could zone them in. They said, no, you can't zone them in. You have to buy the property. So this is why I was really interested in what you had to say and what you're doing. It sounds really exciting. But do you anticipate any skirmishes or any problems with trying to obtain properties in areas that are being densified that really need to have green space in them?
That's complicated. So, yes and no. On the surface, we do land and we do it better than anyone else. And if the land is worth it enough, we believe in property rights and we will buy it. We can do whatever we want with our property. That's consistent with zoning. That includes nothing. At the same time, we are trying to remain very cognizant that there is a housing problem in the urban area. And we do not want to outcompete where communities have the goals for rehousing people. So that's why we've been sending our folks to the neighborhood council meetings and finding out, what their goals are and what their plans are. Some of them have plans, some of them don't. They just, for North Fairmont, the plan they have was put together by the climate coalition that said, here's a climate safe neighborhood plan. That's all they got. So, but understanding where they want housing to be and how we can best complement, really. But when it comes down, if it's green space or endangered species or a no-brainer for conservation, we'll fight for it. Anything else before and we'll get back to everyone getting a chance to talk. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I need to you.
All right, well, thank you, Andy, for that, bringing some context to all this. I think, as you said, we really want to hear from you all and have some good back and forth, so I'll keep it pretty short and sweet here, but essentially for the Civic Garden Center, we're a small environmental nonprofit. We're just around the corner from the Civic Garden Center. We're in Avondale, and our focus when it comes to urban green space is really first and foremost the food aspect. So like Turner Farm, we have a robust community gardens program. We support them with education, with resources, with the know-how to do the gardening, and then what to do with that produce after the fact. And for us, this was an awesome opportunity because one of the main issues when it comes to solidifying urban green space is that ownership problem. I can't tell you how many stories we have of community gardens over the years, especially in the urban core, especially in those densifying neighborhoods where that garden's been there for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and then suddenly a company acquires it and it gets turned into an apartment complex. And while we need more housing, if you spend 10, 20 years investing in the soil in a place, you can't just recreate that overnight, right? If we want to have good, healthy food, good, healthy plants, whatever they might be, you have to invest in the soil and invest in the people in that community. And so as we, our focus is really how do we build up not only the infrastructure in the gardens, but the community and build in that, engagement with it. So that's why for us, one of the things that we do that Cardinal doesn't do is the programming side of it. How do we get out there and offer the education, do the community engagement that is going to help us bring people in to maintain these spaces long term. I'll tell you from my experience, working with groups all over the city, groups like Keep Cincinnati Beautiful, other folks that are, working in this space, the same issue that we all run into consistently is maintenance. Finding spaces to be able to do these projects is step one. Finding the money to install the project, step two, and then the hard part that nobody wants to talk about, but everybody has to do at some point, is how do we maintain these things? Because the number of gardens where we put them in, they look great for a couple of years, and then 10 years down the line, we start to lose interest, and maybe those gardens start to not look so great. That's the real question that excites me and is like, all right, how do we start to do this? I mean, when we have the land ownership, that is a huge piece of it because that takes one big question out of the equation. But over time, it does take that consistent showing up, being a part of that community, listening to that community, and being able to really, offer that point for engagement in which, people can get excited. And for us, growing food is always that first and foremost, excitement point. If you want to get people excited about growing plants, they, have that direct takeaway of being able to taste and smell and, eat things from the garden. There's nothing more powerful than that. I work more so on the native plant, invasive plant side of things, but that usually comes in kind of step two. Once we got the people excited, once we have some food growing, then we can start to talk about the pollinators, the other kind of ecosystem benefits that we want to add into that green space on top of those spaces where we're able to grow the food. So that's a little kind of, our perspective into how we're going to engage in these projects. We're really excited to be working with Cardinal, really excited to be working, having a space that not only that's this large, kind of right within the urban core to be able to experiment and try out different things, but just the number of partners. Because again, coming back to that fund maintenance question, it makes it so much easier when we're all working together. So often we're all kind of like working around the same spots and we're like, oh, we're kind of in the same neighborhoods, but we're not necessarily working together in projects. I think this is going to be a really great opportunity to work collaboratively in a space. And once we start to do that, it should make it easier, hopefully in other neighborhoods too.
I work for Turner Farm, and Turner Farm is an educational farm that's located in Indian Hill. Most people know that's a very expensive neighborhood, but it's over 200 acres and that's protected. It's not a lot of it's in conservation districts, but some of it that are around 40 or 45 acres. And well, that's expanding now. It's in crop production as well as livestock. The farm was always organic. It's now moved more towards regenerative practices. And it's we have educational opportunities. There's a 9-month paid internship program where people want to go into farming, which I think is an excellent opportunity to get the real deal. And so I think it's important. So the community garden program that I direct is kind of, you might say, our outreach program. And so we work with 4 different sites in the city. Our main site is in Price Hill, it's a half-acre site. And Turner Farm also, its crop program is CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. So it's a combination subscription, and you can also have work shares. So when I came to take run the program for Turner Farm, instead of setting it up where people had individual plots, what we did is we set it up as mini field crop, mini farms. And so where everybody works collectively. One of the things I had found, I've been involved with community gardens in one way or another for over 40 years. But it always kind of amazed me that someone can't keep a 4-by-8-foot plot weeded. And so by distributing the work among the group, even the site at Price Hill, which is a half-acre, we were able to kind of keep up with pretty well. So we do have 2 full-time people that work for the community garden program and do a lot of education, outreach, collaboration, and technical advice for different projects. But we also keep a certain standard of organization and an aesthetic aspect to the garden's street appeal, because that's very important. One of the things that I find, if you're gonna want people to come work collectively, they need to come into a garden that there is a sense of order and structure to it. And I think that's extremely important. You know, Sam, you had mentioned about how something gets built and then, you know, interest wanes or different things take place. One of the things we try and do is we want to support the creation of new gardens, but we're also very interested in how can we support existing infrastructure for existing community gardens. I think in some ways you don't need fewer, but I think that we really need to invest in what exists, because there's some really great programs, and from time to time, things shift. You know, the main cheerleader for a garden moves to a different state, and then it takes a little while for somebody else to take place. And so I think like what's, you know, Sam was talking about, and what the Cardinal Land Trust is really important. I think is that to try and find some sort of model where there's someone kind of helping keeping things together and creating open spaces for people to collaborate. And also Turner Farm is part of the Cardinal Land Trust. I think it's important to mention.
Yep.
So I'll add on that, you know, we at Cardinal, we preserve farmland. So we have about 9,000 acres of agricultural easements. And we're kind of switching our focus to ecologically appropriate agriculture instead of just any agriculture. Those are harder to find. And we've also just completed an acquisition or merger with the Oak Heritage Conservancy in Indiana. So we're working now all the way to the Hoosier in Indiana. And they're hungry for agricultural conservation in Indiana. And really their ecology is better in Indiana than it is in Ohio. And I've lived in Ohio my whole life. It's a really cool opportunity to be engaged with people looking at agriculture. But urban agriculture is what we also have an interest in. Working in Wooden Shoe, working with our bar farm. That's one of our flagship properties on Winton and North Bend. And our harvest is a cooperative that works there. They lease 6 acres from us and grow local produce. And, you know, people have it tough here to make a living growing local food. I mean, coming up with the Green Cincinnati plan and being on the food group, it's like, how can we get these guys a living wage? These men and women are working their butts off and they're not making enough to support a family. So as soon as what I've seen, these young people, they love it, they're digging it, they're living on scraps, and then they have a kid or two. Whoa, they're out. You gotta support the family. So we have to do better as a community for that. Our goal, and like they mentioned, we don't do programming, we do land, and we want to be the best at that. But having partners that do programming and can show other people the way, I'm terrible. I used to be in charge of our CSA at Valley View, and people are going like gangbusters in April. But in June, I'm telling it under because they're not coming back and it's filled with weeds, and I've just got no patience for it. So I need you to guys on that wall. But having the land out there that's available for it and preserving the ones we've got. we at Cardinal are very interested in helping permanently preserve some of these places that are gardens that don't know what's next, with the McMicken Gardens, with Druffels Gardens. You know, let's make sure we remove land as a barrier for the longevity of these places, and then let's utilize our partners to help work with getting the word out and keeping the interest high. So I wanted to, I'll open questions to you guys, and then I've got some teaser questions for the other folks if we run out of steam.
Andy, are you done with your presentation? So if you stop the share, people can see the speakers a little better.
Yeah. All right.
Wanted to add that, I'm a moderately successful gardener. I'm new to the experience, but the first time that I ever tasted a potato out of my own yard, I thought, where had this come from? So what I was just saying is, if in some way we could get school children to taste a real vegetable, it is a life-changing experience. You've got all these gardens, and I just think that experience for young people, Girl Scout groups, classrooms, whatever, and I don't know how you make that connection, that if you taste a well-prepared, good, fresh vegetable, it's a life-changing experience.
No, I
Because you
love it.
can't get it at
I
Kroger's.
will let someone else answer that, but I know there are a lot of rules and regulations on who touches what food goes in kids' mouths.
Yeah, I mean, we have a program that speaks exactly to that. I mean, our youth education program is exclusively focused on how do we get kids having those kinds of experiences. We primarily do it through school gardens, because having the garden at the school, just there's so many logistical barriers to like getting a group of students to a garden and being able to have like a positive experience. So much of it happens at the school, and there's, a whole entire world of complexity there in itself. But so much of it is focused on that. And then we do have some summer programming kind of in that realm. So a lot of it, I think, comes from also, like, I think the piece that kind of fits into this conversation tonight is how do we get parents also growing food, and like how do we get more people in the community comfortable with it? Because I think once you have that experience, right, like you're saying, like I taste that tomato that I got to grow myself, I'm going to make sure my kids have it. If there's other, nieces, nephews, whatever, maybe I'm going to share that experience with other people in my family that are coming to the garden. So I think in spaces where people don't have the yard space for it, they live in an apartment, maybe their soil is contaminated at home and they can't grow there, so they're growing down the street. Those, I think that's you start to work with the adults first, and then they can share it down and trickle down in terms of making those spaces really accessible. Otherwise, we generally go to the schools to kind of short gap that hard part of getting the kids out there.
In our gardens, we encourage people to bring their children with them, obviously. And so have that experience, but yeah, I agree with what Sam was saying about with the Civic Garden Center's excellent schoolyard program is really helpful. But it is, we work some with the Recreation Center and the Public Library in Price Hill and have children come through the garden there. But build on what you're saying, in Winton Terrace, the sort of the community there has changed over the last couple of years, but the first several years that were there were a lot of children that came into the garden in the summer. And I was kind of amazed. We'd be picking beans and I'd be looking over and they're just like eating them as they pick them off the vine. So instead strawberries, they would jump the fence to get in and eat all the strawberries, which, I consider it a success. If it's at your own house, maybe you might not like your neighbors jumping your fence and coming in and eat them, but at a community garden, it's a positive asset. But I do think when young people are exposed to food, it's amazing, it'll really kind of turn them on to eating fresh vegetables.
Also, if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat here. We got about 15 people on the Zoom. So if you're on the Zoom, write your questions.
My question is, with the schoolyard program, what neighborhoods, are you targeting certain schools in certain neighborhoods to do that program?
We generally aren't targeting specific neighborhoods. Working with CPS comes with its own, difficulties, to say the least, over the last several years. I would say for us, like it's twofold. There are schools that we go to, and we will provide some of that programming hands-on, but we also really focus on how do you educate the teachers just like we're talking about having a champion that can kind of help lead the charge in terms of maintaining a green space, in terms of getting the community engaged. You need a teacher champion at a school. And hopefully if one person is willing to take on that, difficult task of keeping the garden up, getting the PTO involved, getting other teachers excited about it, comfortable with it is another big barrier. Then it's gonna, really kind of grow beyond just working with one single class. We're a small crew too, right? We're only 10 staff. We only have one person who goes to the schools and offers this programming. So we couldn't even begin to scratch the surface of all the students here in Cincinnati. So if we can really focus on getting more teachers comfortable with it, then that can really, exponentially increase the number of kids that have those experiences.
So I feel I can speak a little of this because my wife is a teacher and is ready to retire this year. So one of the things we found success with is young teachers are always looking to get additional education credits, and it increases their pay. So we were fortunate enough to have a teacher in Milford create a K-8 outdoor curriculum for their school because they border a nature preserve. And she has that as an example to share, but it would be nice if we could work with a teacher getting their master's or a PhD on the garden aspect. I think there's loads of opportunity for that.
One thing about the public schools or private schools, whatever, is you remember that they're off in the summer, and that's the main growing season. So that is kind of problematic. I know that some schools have had to try and have these school garden hybrid community gardens, but then the logistics of having non-parents come onto the property, you can just imagine the bureaucracy. Andy talked about food safety. It's like, you can't just start serving vegetables from the school garden in the cafeteria. There's all sorts of, regulations and stuff like that, so how you do that. So one thing I'm really interested in is how can existing community gardens somehow become a little bit more open and recruiting and have more children from it even during the summer. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about too, especially with the recreation centers and the public libraries. And I know this in 2026, we're trying to really rethink how we can engage more young people in that way. But then somehow, the interact with the school and the school gardens are great, but we have to keep in mind that the main growing season is when school is out.
Yeah.
And the teachers need a break. They work way too hard.
Are there questions online, Barry?
yes.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, we got Blake right here.
I actually have two questions. So first off, I really like the kind of multifunctionality of the space that you guys are proposing. But I'm kind of curious to hear, like, is there any existing collaborative that you're basing sort of the model that you are putting together off of? Is there another sort of group that's kind of doing something similar where you're having a lot of different organizations kind of having holding stake in one area of land?
No. I mean, I don't know of any. I mean, I reach out to other groups all the time. One of the groups that we're peer copying off of, is Western Reserve Conservancy in Cleveland. They have a great urban program. They have done partnered with other groups, but not like this. I think this is just something that, evolved and felt right and kept evolving. So if there's another a group of groups doing this, we don't know about it.
Okay. That's cool, I think. You also mentioned earlier, like I know you kind of, as a land conservancy as a whole, you're working in sort of land acquisition and trying to get that land for conservation purposes, but you also mentioned how you're sort of working in preserving agricultural land, and you use the term ecologically appropriate agriculture. And you also specifically mentioned like that's something that's going on in Indiana more in particular. When you referenced that, were you saying that Indiana is looking to conserve ecologically minded agriculture, or that's more of just like a goal that you have at Cardinal?
That's a goal we have at Cardinal.
Okay.
So Cardinal is the one that switched our mindset from preserving any agricultural lands, then we were looking at prime farm soils, and now we're looking at ecologically appropriate agriculture. We've got easements on farms that are edge to edge beans all year long. That agricultural land is preserved and will be preserved forever. They're not doing cover crops. They're not doing grass waterways. They're not doing those things that are appropriate to be the best they can for water quality, for wildlife. We can actually be stewards of the Farm Bill. And we're working with Wilmington College, and they've just created a major on ecological restoration. And that's in accompanying them as the other four-year ag school in Ohio, because a lot of the farmers, these college kid farmers, are learning the business of farming. It's big business. Why can't they learn how to run a fluffy seed drip, to plant native grasses, to filter water and attract wildlife? I mean, we put together a pollinator friendly pasture on our bar farm. So the idea for ecologically appropriate agriculture, and we're still defining that as our group, but it is a way that farmers can use regenerative agriculture for smaller farms and big ones too, cover crops, no-till, making sure they get soil tests, just helping them they need to prove they're doing the best practices for their farm before we'll entertain an easement.
Is there any existing programs that you have that would potentially be able to work with a landowner if they were interested in conserving their agricultural land and potentially turning it into something that was ecologically appropriate?
Yes, we have a soil health steward program. We partnered with American Farmland Trust, and it's just a menu of options. But if someone is serious about it, we'll sit down with them and the NRCS conservation manager for the county and see what they're really interested in agriculturally, and then we'll figure out what they're interested in preserving their property. Because when it comes to an easement, when we hold an easement is forever protection. We don't own the property. We own a layer of protection over top of it. And that layer of protection is usually the development rights. So it can't be subdivided or developed. We carve out a space of minimum protection where the barns and houses are. Medium protection is where the crops are, and maximum protection is where the waterways are. And then they know how to treat those areas. We don't tell them how to farm, but it won't be developed. And we make sure that those the agricultural conservation values are upheld in perpetuity. And if they develop or do something to it later, we take them to court, get it to go back.
Thank you.
This is really exciting what you're doing. It's really, it's great, kind of a good beginning. I could see it, you know, once you one place where you can showcase what you're doing, other people will follow and it will kind of grow throughout the city, I can imagine. So you were saying that you were working with the city. To what extent are you working with them with this new project with sort of connected communities, for example? They have this big plan where they're densifying and building and developing land and so on. Are you kind of working with them to try to decide, you know, where lots can go throughout the city, where they would serve best, where they would serve a community, like with a community garden in a food desert, for example? Is there kind of a strategic plan?
You're good at the complicated stuff. No, we're not. And this part that I just identified to you on the maps, after we just signed the leases for them, that got moved as a priority zone for redevelopment that it wasn't before. And it's at the bottom of the landslide area. It's kind of not a great place for that. So while we're not looking to take away housing opportunities for folks, there's also appropriately placed housing. We're just embarking on our partnership with the city, and that's through the grant program for leveraging support. And we were very clear that we're going to work to increase green spaces in these neighborhoods and around these schools to get started. It could blossom into helping them prioritize where housing and green space should go, but it's not there yet.
Would you define green space?
Mm.
Is that a tree or that's 3 shrubs or what does that?
So I led the Green Space Action Team for Green Umbrella for years, and it took us 2 years to define green space.
Well, give us the benefit of what that means.
So it is protected green space that can be grass or trees or water, but it is not a golf course or a
Okay,
cemetery.
I have one more question, just want to ask about land use. Yes, you know, we have a big problem in sewers and basement overflow and that kind of thing. And we need to develop more of a sponge city. So good use of land would be to find green infrastructure for holding water. And I have identified a spot where we're actually working on a bioswale in between a church and a school. It's a big space that will collect water. And I'm just wondering if you have plans for doing that kind of thing too in these green spaces.
That'll be on a case by case basis. It'll depend on the soils and where it is. But we love bioswales. We love to keep water out of our terrible sewers here in Cincinnati. So we'll do what we can. On these lots that you just saw, that they're all put together. You know, we agreed to pay the bills for them. Well, all those old lots, you know, on one parcel, it's 20 lots, so there's still water bills and, what's the runoff fee? Stormwater fee that we're paying for those empty lots. So we gotta fix some problems with how the city bills too. But yeah, we do wanna look for rain gardens and water retention. And we're actually looking at pervious parking on these sites instead of asphalt. But that's not one of our targets. We wanna get the land first and then we'll do our best with it once we get it.
Like following the same topic, water conservation, which always seems to get left out of the conversation. And I know what water wars are about, how they come about is awful. And with a changing climate, there's drought and then bunches of rain that just flood. And we haven't learned how to mitigate that. We also support golf courses, and I see like a lot of people, we need a culture change because we have a culture of lawn loving and pool. We're not as bad as California, but pool loving. I'm afraid of swimming, everybody having a swimming pool in their yard. Luckily, we have winter here. But we really need a change in culture amongst ourselves to make our area, our living, our environment the best we can with the minimum amount of muscle power. We need to use our brains, but it's culture, changing that culture. Just maintaining a lawn, let alone a golf course. You know, and people want their golf courses so badly. And they have power, they have money, and going along with that is that the Greater Cincinnati water, we have really the best water around in country and we pay for it. And it was a result of because our Ohio River was so polluted, there was a court order to fix that. And instead of going haphazardly like Flint or other municipalities, they went for the gap, you know, the state of the art. So worth the investment. Thusly, I just hear that this is public water, Greater Cincinnati Water Works. There's fewer and fewer public works that are out there anymore that are assets owned by the people. And people, private equity wants that. It's really hard to protect. And we just don't have the infrastructure political infrastructure with that, knowing how all this works. Farmland, private equity is your competitor.
Okay, so you bring up a good point. I think that cultural evolution is slowing down or stopping. And I believe as we're looking for more partners, that's where we could use folks like the Sierra Club to help us. Because I think that our role at Cardinal is to do land and do it well. And in Loveland, we are working on a sample lawnscape instead of lawn, right? Some native plants. We got to get past zoning that says you can't, your grass can't be more than a foot high, but that's part of the cultural shift. As people understand what they can do, maybe we can help them do it better. But our goal is to do it and lead by example, and then have our programming partners help around the city with that.
Yeah, I think I'll just briefly add on. I mean, I think that the culture piece, I mean, I do think you need places where you can go see this done well, right? So you have the idea. I think especially when it comes to plants and, you know, so much of retaining water, improving water quality, all those things like kind of revolves around the plant world. How can we better use plants in our urban environments, on our houses? And we can use them for functional things, for food, we can use them for, you know, all kinds of other benefits. But I think a lot of people have a hard time, especially in this digital age, like imagining what those possibilities are. So we need places where not only can we show them some really fun, exciting ways to do things, you know, Taking Root is trying out the Miyawaki Forest method here in Camp Washington. They're trying out some different types of gardens and spaces. Like we have other groups that are experimenting, and we need that experimentation. And then we need to be able to have a place that people can see that and be able to learn from it, so then they can take those things back home. And hopefully they have places to come and learn firsthand from them.
All right, we got one question in the chat here from Joe Zucker. He says, I know someone with a garden that wants to preserve it. Who should that owner contact?
Reach out to us at Cardinal. So call our number at the office and you will get channeled to the right person. I'll put it in the chat. It's 513-752-2828.
Cool.
So at the beginning of the presentation, we showed that map of Cincinnati, which sort of broke Cincinnati down into different conservation priority chunks. And one of the metrics that you used there was existence of endangered species there and sort of general habitat quality of those areas. And I know that like community gardens are going to be ecologically better than a parking lot. But from my understanding, like community gardens do not really serve or like act as high quality habitat in the same sense that like a natural area would. And I know that like the partners here, y'all are community gardens, which again is really good. But when you're deciding like how to position or how to use this land, that you've prioritized and you've used these metrics for, like, how do you determine whether to turn it into like human usable green space, specifically like high quality natural areas for like high quality environmental spaces for endangered animals or something like that, or for a community garden? Is there any sort of like specific like metrics or flow charts or anything, or is it all just like so very context dependent that it's hard to give an overarching plan for that?
So I think both. We have that and there's context. I'll give an example. So, and it's two different things, right? So when we do local food, we will own land for local food if one of our partners says they will help us with it. We're not actively engaged in trying to procure parcels and force local food on folks. If the community wants it or one of our partners want it, we're willing to pursue it. For the ecological stuff, that's what we're good at and that's what we're going for. There are some pieces that people shouldn't go. We're pursuing right now 40 acres of the last known stronghold for Cape salamanders. And we've got a deal and we're going to get it. But the public can't go there. Some places need to be conserved for conservation's sake. And we're looking at those and we're looking at them hard and we're willing to go after those hard.
Yeah. So briefly, I want to add one thing is, you know, it is interesting when you talk about land use, and particularly with community gardens, is that it's kind of an interesting thing. If you don't want to create a habitat for groundhogs and certain deer and stuff, they're going to come and decimate the crops. So that is a paradox there. We want to create a healthy space, but if it's farmed or gardened organically or regeneratively or permaculture, or whatever term you want to use, it does increase biodiversity within it in terms of insects. So there is a contribution, but then also, like Andy said, I'm sure you probably agree, we need designated areas that are protected. And really, in some cases, I think that if possible, humans shouldn't go into it. That Turner Farm has land that's in wooded lots, and we don't think we actually have any old growth, but there are certain areas that are just protected. And they will never be turned into farmland, even that's within the parameters of the organization at Turner Farm itself. It's not what Andy's or Cardinal's delineating. It's what Bonnie Matsui, way she set the thing up.
Well, and how much diversity is in soil?
Oh, my God.
Microphone.
You can't even.
Andy, I might add that I think that,
Microphone.
Microphone.
I think we have a lot of properties that Cardinal has these, 12,000 acres or whatever, that are protected, and some of them don't have humans as the major audience, right? That they're not, they're large swaths to protect biodiversity. That's what they're for. I think the urban program that we're starting now is a little bit different, where it really is a lot about bringing in that access to nature to people in the community and bringing along these education on the gardens and becoming champions for the natural spaces. And that becomes a little more important with the places within the city as one of the many things we're considering.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Susan. I mean, from a business perspective, you guys that run businesses know, we're in the business of conservation. We're trying to run it like a business. And we all know these things tie together pretty closely. Human health, green space, art, science, education. I think if we do our job right, working with our partner groups, we can diversify our portfolio of funders and be able to say with power what we're doing. And that's hopefully where we're going to get to with our partners at UC and measuring impacts of these green spaces.
All right, we got the next question here.
Are you concerned at all about the possibility of forever chemicals in the land that you're considering for green space?
Like what? PFAS?
Yeah. Okay.
I am, but when we're buying green lands and not brownfield developed places, I'm less concerned. When it comes to our protection of those places, the best thing for them usually is what we're gonna do to them. Restore these deep-rooted grasslands that are drought-proof and restore the trees. I think what I'll rely on when it comes to the local food going there is our partners doing their due diligence on soil and amending soil and soil tests to make sure we're not passing any chemicals along to other folks.
One thing we haven't mentioned, and often goes with land, is energy. And I was wondering, is there any discussion about any lands that you have that might be appropriate for use in energy development in the future? Would that would be symbiotic with the mission that you're setting up here? Because as you set up collaborators, and as you look at the continual problem of budget and purchasing and zoning and community, you're going to be in a lot of different communities. So you really raised the question in my head, might it be a factor or might it not be a factor? I know you're early in the process, and I want to say I commend everyone. This is fantastic.
So again, you guys are really good. We're a nonprofit. We love renewable energy. I mean, if you guys haven't done this, go to the Ohio Supplier website and choose 100% renewable electricity to be supplied to your house. I save 2 cents off of Duke's rate.
It was lower.
They also have carbon neutral gas. That being said, our peers around the state, many of them can't stand solar. Because they see, if you go up to Highland County, you see 400 acres of solar panels that used to be beans.
Right.
That's
Everyone's got a
Cincinnati, by the
perspective
way.
about that. So that's for Cincinnati's is, you're
Right.
exactly right. And they've got a bad name in Highland County. But that's a perspective thing. No one dies from solar spill. We have seen across the state fracking be a huge problem. And the problems it causes to people and water and the Ohio River is terrible. I would much rather have 400 acres of solar than 1 acre of fracking. At the same time, we as a land conservancy aren't going to get into industrial solar development. Again, running the business of conservation, I would love that. Make enough money to drive our operating every year, so Susan doesn't have to work so hard bringing it in, great. But that's too much unrelated business income. Would we be willing to start a sister nonprofit that would do that? Yes, we would. So in the city, it's tough. I think it's a lot by lot, a case by case basis. We're not against solar, we're totally for renewable. But I don't think we're going to do it at a scale large enough to drive policy or perspective in the near future.
Yeah, great, fortunately. First of all, hats off to what you all as a group are doing. It's just fantastic. As a partners of the Turner Farm and Civic Garden Center and the Venture Crew, which I'm on the board of still. And yeah, I'm so excited about that, us participating with you in this new facility. So I'd love to hear your thinking about, imagine it's 10 years down the pike and you came back to us and said, look what we have created at this particular facility. And look how we now have a campground for students to spend the night properly supervised. We have a bonfire area, we have a slack line, we have a nursery area where young people can learn how to grow certain kinds of trees and shrubs, et cetera. That and you know maybe there's a set of rain gardens to address some earlier questions, and maybe have solar on the roof of the warehouse, perhaps not interfering with crops. So anyway, I'm just trying to get a sense from you all about your vision about this down the pike, and how it might actually look from the point of view of Adventure Crew. And it's not like I've been working with the board thinking through exactly what we want, but just I think it would be great for us to be able to make use of that facility for urban teens who may live a mile away to have an outdoor experience in their own backyard, supervised properly, right? So anyway, just love to hear what your thinking is about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, dreaming big or dreaming real, sometimes it's different. But I think if we did have, you know, and not just about Adventure Crew, right? About these green spaces. I think if that red map had a bunch of blossoming green blobs around all the urban schools, and that we could say that the number of hits on these GPS marked asthma inhalers have been reduced by 75%. I think if we could say we've got, you know, let's just say one of the things we've kicked around is we would be able to hike on the west bank of the Mill Creek from the Ohio River to Tri-County. That may take longer than 10 years, but if we did that all on protected property, that would be a great thing. If we're able to have these kids have that experience in the urban area, properly supervised, mountain biking, camping, you know, in the urban environment, if we could make sure we get the lights out. We've talked about putting up the monitors that are towers, Mobius towers, that actually any birds that are tagged during migration, it counts them 5 miles either direction. And we can actually see how birds are behaving at night traveling over top of the city. And we could drive what green space we protect and where we focus lights out efforts because of that data. You know, having the restored food nodes back in the old days, we had a food node network in greater Cincinnati. And a lot of it centered at Fenton Market, but we don't have to have centers anymore. We can have nodes on the outskirts of the city that people could still go to. I don't know, that might be a good 10-year from now.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, I mean, it's a beautiful question. I think it's one that as we are trying to like imagine, you know, one of the things Andy mentioned early on, we'd love to have a space for our market garden programs, which is a new program that we're trying to launch, which would be folks who want to grow food and, you know, start to make a little bit of money at it. You know, as Andy said, the margins are slim, but the hardest thing for anyone who's starting out in that world is where do I grow it? Where, like, if I don't have the land to even get the skills that I need to then go and acquire my own land and start my business, it's so much harder. And so for so many people, that's a huge barrier. So to me, I think that is a piece that could fit into this. You know, I think really how do we start to take down some barriers in terms of, you know, just engaging people in different types of gardens, gardening spaces. And so I think this would be a beautiful space where, you know, kind of to your point earlier in terms of, oh, well, if we have a community garden, maybe it gets really food focused. I think this is a place where we can bring together all these different elements, you know, the ecological perspective, the food element, the human recreational side in one place, and that people get to experience it, and that they can kind of really have these positive takeaways. And so I think that's gonna, you know, involve having things like fruit trees and native plants and the bioswales. And I think being able to integrate that all in one, you know, where we have the actual property to do it all in one place and do it at a decent enough scale that it's not like, oh, this is our native plant garden and there's 10 plants over in that corner. You know, be able to show people at scale what this looks like, and the biodiversity that results in it, I think is really the vision, the opportunity that I see there.
No, it's been several decades, I think since this book's been written, but David Sobel wrote a book called Ecophobia. But it kind of addressed to how people are becoming isolated from nature. And one of the things I think is very interesting about this site and the outdoor kind of education programs that Rooster had talked about is that you have young people out there in these spaces playing. And some of it is, you know, cultivated, but then some of it is more natural. But no, often if you kind of think about this big push on sports, and I think sports are fine. I don't have a problem with soccer or football or anything. But, you know, those are more grass mowed lawns, you know, and also it's a very rigid, you know, and to a certain degree violent kind of activity for young people to do. If you get these adventure programs going where it's more creative play and collaborative work and supportive work for young people in a natural setting, I think that's very important. I mean, a lot of people I know have been involved with gardening. You know, they build a pollinator garden at a school or a child care center. Then all of a sudden you have the teachers protesting because there's bees. You know, so it's like, how do you, you know, reconcile this and how do you introduce people and teach people that the natural world isn't something to be afraid of. And I think these types of programs are you know, like super important.
So Brewster, those guys reminded me that, you know, through going to the North Fairmont Community Council, one of the things their council leader said to us was she would really love for Cardinal to be involved in North Fairmont and protect these green spaces and help the local community see the value in protected green space. So they'll help better take care of it, better take care of their own property, decrease the litter and increase everyone's property value. And I thought that was a very powerful statement from her. So I think if we do our job right in 10 years, we'll be getting down that path to a little more pride and green.
Other questions from the audience?
I have a comment. This is not so much a question or a comment, but you talked about big ideas versus doable ideas. And So one big idea that I've had recently, and it relates to connected communities, it also relates to the, traditional, city requirement of so much parking for so many beds or so many units. And so, what I'd like to see, and it might be pie in the sky, but I'd like to see a requirement with new building developments of so much green space within the apartment development and perhaps even dedicated gardens for the people that live there. So they could come to your place and discover pollinator gardens, but they could go out in their backyard and pick tomatoes as apartment dwellers. And we know that it's between 50 and 60% of Cincinnatians that actually live in apartment units that are 5 or greater. So there are a lot of population in those apartments, but they might only have a parking lot in their backyard. So I would like to see that written into the addendum of the Green Cincinnati plan. I think it would make people have green right there where they live, so.
I love it. And I mean, the developers are gonna fight you on it, it's more expensive. But, you know, I'm actually meeting with city officials tomorrow to talk about using TIF money for green infrastructure. So hopefully we can find a way. There are some areas in the city that have TIF funds that are just sitting there. Why can't we use them? I think the answer is we can, and maybe it can do for stuff like that.
When it comes to managing city expectations, I know that you had mentioned for, can everyone hear me? All right. For managing city expectations, and what is this group doing to make sure that everything stays in balance? For example, water stability with, bringing in more green to, retain water as opposed to having a lot of droughts and a lot of floods, that for the community around that is so used to droughts and floods, when we develop that stability and have more waterways around, and all of a sudden there comes a wave of complaints saying, hey, there's mosquitoes everywhere, or, we bring back wildlife, and now people who aren't used to wildlife now see a bunny in their garden, and, they kind of see it as an issue and something to be, resolved. How do we ensure that every single, I don't know, factor is considered? Like, for me in my head, I'm thinking like, throw out some bat boxes so that in the years when we have, more stable water areas, that, we don't have as many complaints about mosquitoes and pests, and like make sure that everything is running at the exact same time in congruency.
I love that. No way we're gonna do it. People will complain about that. At some point, we just have to not care. If we're going down. If keeping everything in balance, I mean, zooming in and zooming out is tough. I mean, we're gonna have climate refugees here. There are lots. I just got back from the desert. I was out in the desert for 5 days. And it's bad out west. And, we get so much rain, they're like, oh, you're lucky. I'm like, yeah, well, we're getting way more rain, way fewer events. That's more droughts and more flooding for us. We know what our climate future is. And if we can do our best to mitigate it through these climate connected forests, those dark green blobs on that map, that's where we need to preserve to help preserve our climate future as long as we can. I think in the interim, we're going to be winners. Interim is the next 50 years. We here in our special place in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana are going to be climate winners. Now, that doesn't mean we can't lose sight of what we want to do and how we want to do it for our climate connected, climate resilient stuff. But as we're doing those things and making a wake as we move down the climate protection path, I don't think we can worry about some of the noise that's behind trying to get in the way.
Right. Thank you.
I just want to support what you said, and in this board where I have spent a lot of time. A lot of work in the public domain has been trying to allow water to flow back to the ocean. And the complaints are exactly what you said. We have more mosquitoes, we have more problems with some plants coming in we didn't want, and so on. And the list goes on and on. But then when the hurricane comes and the water flows out a little better than it did, and there's a little less damage, even though the damage was terrible, it could have been even more terrible with more difficulty in insurance claims, which are very hard. So I think the lesson we're getting down in Venice is we still have to do these mitigating conservation actions to care for the land, or we can't even begin to cope with climate. And it's become self-evident in the last 2 hurricanes of the last 2 years. The attitude's really changed. And nobody misses a beat because your insurance bill comes in and it's going up 33% at a click. Okay? So, and people want to stay. So they want to solve the problems. And that's where I think you're on the right track. So I just wanted to say that's an extreme example, but they're really fussing about it, but action is happening strongly on the conservation side in a state that you might first think wouldn't necessarily be oriented that way.
Yeah, it's an economic model, and you don't have any private should run the property for it. Pretty few. That's why they are saying it doesn't exist. They don't want to pay the premium. But up here, there's a business case, and we own the first certified carbon credits in the city of Cincinnati that we're looking to sell. And with that money, we're going to turn over and protect more land. But we're doing it through city forest credits. So it's not just the amount of carbon that are in the trees that we're preserving. It's in the ecosystem benefits that forest provides. So it's not the going rate of $5 or $6 a credit that we're looking to get for it. We're looking to get 30 and 40. People are actually sucking in the oxygen coming off of the trees that we're preserving. It's not out in the hinterlands. So there is a model for that, and we're hoping to grow that model in the city and in the urban area as well.
I've got a question. So Kaylee and I were having a good chat prior to the talk, and she's interested in urban foraging. I was curious if you guys do any kind of programming or have any considerations for foraging.
You know, I have lots of feelings about foraging. Foraging can be amazing, and so often it's done very poorly. And if we think about it, especially in urban areas, we really have to just be careful about how much we're encouraging foraging, especially in public spaces. Because if we think about the number of people in the city versus the number of green spaces we have for those plants to exist, we will out forage whatever is there very quickly, right? I'm a very big believer in learn how to grow the plants in your community garden, in your home property. You can grow, your pawpaws or any of these things right there at home. Not to say that there's not a place for foraging, but foraging at scale in public spaces is really a tricky thing. We do some foraging classes, and we'll, try to teach the ethics along with it. But so often I see people going out and completely ignoring the ethics and misusing the public land. I think we have a long way to go in terms of behavioral changes and kind of cultural changes around it, because we get so focused on find this population of this thing and they want to take it all. Right. Like if we learn from those indigenous folks that were here before us, never take more than half. You never take the first that you come across, right? There's lessons to be learned here, and there's lessons that we don't have baked into that foraging culture yet. So I think it's one of those things where I would love for having edible plants at a space like this, but more so that people can learn how to grow them at home versus them being spaces for, that level of foraging. So I think it's one of those things where it's very popular right now. And speaking to Peter's point, anything that's going to get people these deeper connections to nature, I am all for. But it's one of those things where we have to, bring in a little bit more of that ethical conversation with it so that we have sustainable populations. So the wildlife also has food that, they're relying on these plants as well. So I think it's one of those things where we have to do it the right way. And if we can show people that there are alternatives, that, hey, when you can grow these things at home and you have a healthy population, or again, like in your community, those to me are much more powerful, long-term sustainable avenues than just like the short term, I'm foraging for this season, but I'm not really like giving back to the land. I'm not really cultivating this population in my own community in some way that makes it sustainable for everyone to do it.
I'd just like to mention the Common Orchard project that's administered by Chris Smith. They're creating sites around the city that are, well, I guess they're kind of a community garden in the sense that they're planting trees and helping to maintain fruits and berries and different things, and that where people can come and harvest. So it's different than going into a park or a reserve and over harvesting. I mean, particularly something like ramps. You know, if you really don't know what you're doing, you can decimate, you know, the population of that plant. So I think that, you know, I would really encourage people to look into the Common Orchard project. I think they're doing some good stuff. And then Turner's sites, we do have berries and perennials that we're doing in Price Hill. We're looking long-term towards trying to do an expanded project that's more of a foraging woodland garden that Chris Smith is interested in helping us on. But I do think we have to remember that, you know, our neighboring animals need all of this too. We want to be very mindful of what their needs are.
Great answer. We got another longer question from the chat here from Brian Bull. The NRCS funded projects typically require protection by landowners for a specific time period. So it could be 50 to 30 years, depending on the program. When Cardinal partners with NRCS on projects / land preservation, can a Cardinal easement supersede the NRCS easement such that wetlands, grass waterways, riparian corridors, etc. are protected forever?
Hi, Brian. So we partner with NRCS when we apply for funding to preserve an agricultural landscape. So we apply and we can get roughly 50% of the value of the property to the landowner in exchange for them giving up their development rights and basically for an agricultural easement. We do not hold easements on other NRCS temporary easement properties. However, that's not to say we wouldn't. So if a landowner came to us and had a property in the Conservation Reserve Program, part of the Farm Bill, which is typically 15 years, we'd be more than happy to hold an easement on that. CRP is a gateway drug for conservation and green space. So hell yeah. But we work well with different levels of NRCS. We've had some trouble in Ohio with their ASAP ALE program. We don't see eye to eye all the time. And we're working through that, but we, believe it or not, we don't work in the federal space a lot. The federal space is challenging, money's hard to get, and now it's gone. And, you know, it seems like everyone's in trouble there. So at Cardinal, we've kept our eye on state and private donations, and we're still able to conserve lots of property and to us do the right thing. We're not against using NRCS, but we're not registered to use it in Ohio in the near future. I think if we use that program, we will use it in Indiana, where they have something called a Sentinel Landscapes. So that's different because it's Department of Defense money. And they don't have a budget. It's unlimited. So they're never going to run out of money. But if we work near the Big Oaks National Wildlife Refuge or Muscatatuck National Wetlands, we can get money to buy easements and buffer those properties. And it'll be working with NRCS staff, but it's not their money. So, I mean, we love NRCS and we love the programs, and we will do what we can to help people learn about the Farm Bill. We actually are getting an enhanced CRP, Conservation Reserve Enhanced Program in Ohio, sponsored by Quail Unlimited. So the cost shares for doing some of these practices are going to be up to 90% instead of 50. So we're hoping to turn all of our conservation crew into farmland biologists.
Any more questions?
I just really enjoyed this. I've learned so much, and thank you so much for sharing all your different perspectives on all the possibilities and the vision. That's really exciting. I'm just wondering how Sierra Club can be partnering with you in some way. I don't know what we could bring to the table. Is there
Love and money.
suggestion?
Well, I mean, I think the Sierra Club is so good about getting the word out. I mean, here, we don't program. We program like wasps pollinate, right? We do it by accident. But we do take care of land. So it's that when you guys are out and there is a big issue that you're tackling or fighting, and there's a role you need for, say, street credit for science and green space, bring us along. And I think maybe when we need, some help politically, and sometimes we do. I mean, we're working hard on maintaining positive political relationships, and they're easy to get in the blue parts of the state. Most of the state is not blue. And it's a different mindset. And to me, again, blue and red make green. So everyone deserves green space. So, and I think that's where you guys come in and are a great partner to help us the political landscape and some of that taking action type of approach.